Hello class, welcome to our next lesson in section 4.2. We're going to be looking at the translations of the graphs of sine and cosine again today. Remember, the focus of a lot of things for the course is on sine and cosine. They're the most useful of the trig graphs, so we tend to focus on them more as we go through these sections. I'm going to focus in on just finding all the information. A lot of times we have graphing utilities that can help explain some things, but you have to be able to figure out certain aspects of a graph. So for this question, the 4 out front would represent the amplitude. The period will be 2 pi because there's no number in front of the x. And then remember, if it's plus 3 pi over 4 in the parentheses, that moves everything to the left. So your equation then, or your graph, excuse me, would be moved to the left 3 pi over 4. When you're graphing things and using utilities, you may have to plug that in as a negative 3 pi over 4. Also, some programs, instead of the pi symbol, you can just type in the letters for pi, just pi. That might be another suggestion for a question of that nature. The next one is a cosine graph, but the period and amplitude work the same way. So 2 is the amplitude. The period is 2 pi because there's no number in front of the x. You move everything to the left pi. Okay, so moving everything to the left because it's a plus on the inside. And then the plus 3 at the end is a vertical shift, and that moves everything up 3. Vertical shift, same idea. If it's a negative or a subtraction, you might have to plug that in as a negative in order for the vertical shifts to work on a graphing utility question. The next one has cosine of 2x plus pi, then minus 1. Students normally get all the pieces right except for the phase shift. So the number in front of cosine is 1, so it's just an amplitude of 1. The number in front of x is 2, so 2 pi over 2 is pi. And then the minus 1 moves everything down 1. The part that's missed is you have to factor this inside portion. So you'll notice I took a 2 out of both of these pieces, take 2 out of x and 2 out of pi. And essentially what that does is divide everything. So the 2 is out front, parenthesis x plus, and then take pi divided by 2. So the phase shift is not moving to the left pi, it's actually moving to the left pi over 2 because the formula for translations of trig graphs requires you to have it in factored form. This would be similar to vertex form or things like ellipses that you did in Algebra 2. The same reasoning is here. And so that phase shift is to the left pi over 2, not pi. The next one has amplitude of 3 because the number in front of sine is 3. The period is 2 pi because there's nothing in front of the x. Moving to the left pi over 2. And don't forget you meant to plug that in as a negative. You move the graph up 2. The equilibrium shifts up 2. And then the most common mistake is the x-axis reflection. What you'll want to work on your homework is making sure you're plugging things in the right order. Typically, you have to follow the order of operations, so you could start from the inside and then do the 3 and then the flip and then the up 2. Okay, you got to make sure things are in the right order. So if you're missing some of those questions on your homework, you want to make sure that once you get it set up correctly that you go in that same order every time. Think about order of operations, though, and that should help be successful on those questions. In terms of graphing, make sure for sine and cosine graphs, you notice when the equilibrium is changed, so this moves everything up 1. So notice I put a dotted line at 1 now because I'm not on the x-axis for equilibrium, I'm up 1. And then the amplitude is 2, so I go 2 above that as my starting point, and then work my way down and back in a distance of 2 pi, because the period is 2 pi for this graph. Halfway in between, I should be down 2, and then the equilibrium points in between those. The next question, you have a negative 2, so that has an amplitude of 2 with an x-axis reflection. So a sine graph typically starts going upward then down. So this graph's going to start down then up. Okay, so your valley is first, then the hill is second, or the mountain is second. This question has that same issue that we talked about before. You got to factor the 2 out to figure out the correct phase shift. The period would be 2 pi divided by 2. You would get that right regardless of if you factored it or not. But everything shifts to the left pi over 2. So what you'll notice here is these blue dots, okay, that I put originally were the graph without the phase shift, and then I switched them all over to the left pi over 2, and that's where this new graph, or the actual graph, excuse me, comes from for this equation. You'll want to make sure that you're factoring those pieces. That shows up from time to time, and then watch your order of operations in terms of when do you do the flip. This one probably has less of that issue because there's no vertical shift with it, but you want to make sure that you're paying close attention to those scenarios as you're looking at these questions. The focus for these lessons is going to be sine and cosine. Our next lessons after this are going to probably have some review of these topics and then also some graphs of the other 4 trig functions. But you need to make sure that you're focusing focusing in on how to deal with sine and cosine graphs, their phase shifts, vertical shifts, x-axis reflection, the period, and the amplitude. Have a good day, everyone.